Good afternoon, everyone. And well, I want to call the consent and action review meeting to order. Let's begin with introductions, and we'll start with our city attorney.
Good evening, Patrick Baker, City Attorney.
Good evening, Victoria Wallington, City Council District 3.
Doug McCarty, District 6.
Ed Drakes, District 7.
Malcolm Graham, District 2.
Marcus Jones, City Manager.
Vi Lyles, Mayor.
Braxton Winston, Mayor Pro Tem.
Happy holidays, LaWanna Mayfield, Council at Large.
Good evening, Renee Johnson, and I'm honored to serve District 4.
Ariel Smith, Lead City Clerk.
Thank you, everyone. Today, and the point of this meeting is for us to take action on our consent items, as well as look at items that the manager has prepared for the future so that he can introduce those items to us in this meeting. Tonight, we have on our agenda review the year-end 2023 year-end audit that's going to be presented by our finance team, and the 2024 council calendar, which is going to be presented by our city clerk. Before we do that, let's ask Ms. Harris if she has anything that she'd need to share with us on the consent items. The information that I have is that several of the property transactions have been resolved and settled, and so items 36, 30, and 37 do no longer require adoption.
And I believe it's 35, 36, and 37.
35 and 36 and 37, you're right. I did circle 35, I just didn't say it. All right, so 35, 36, and 37. Are there any other questions for Ms. Harris? Ms. Johnson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want a clarification on those items. Are they resolved or are they deferred until a later meeting?
So they're reaching agreement with the property owner. This is the same property owner for all three of those, and they're hoping to come back to you in the 11th as a acquisition, or they'll be settled and not have to come back. But we're not 100% sure, but that's why the staff pulled them, saying that they were settling them.
I spoke to Angela Charles earlier about them because they're in District 4, so I wanted some clarification. Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
All
Thank you.
right. Hearing any other discussion or question, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda items 17 through 49 with 35, 36, and 37 that have been settled?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? We've already had discussion. All in favor, please raise your hands. All right, that's everyone present. Thank you very much for that. So the next item on our agenda is the audit. I'll ask the city manager to introduce the overview.
So thank you, Mayor and members of council. Normally, we would have the audit executive summary at the budget committee meeting. Because we don't have any more budget committee meetings for the year, and we're required to bring this before the body, we're having our CFO, Teresa Smith, introduce our guests, and this would fulfill the requirement of having the discussion about the FY23 audit in front of the council. So thank you. Mayor, if there are any questions, I'd like to turn it over to Teresa.
Hi, good to see you.
Yes,
I hope you had a good holiday.
I did. Thank you.
Good.
I hope you did as well.
Thank you.
Again, my name is Teresa Smith. I'm the CFO in the Finance Department. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you today to present the FY23 year-end financial audit results. I do have two people with me. I have Betty Matos, who is our Chief Accountant in the Finance Department. I also have Daniel Goggerty, who is a director with Cherry Beckert, and Mr. Goggerty is going to be presenting the results to you of the audit. You may recall that North Carolina general statutes require that the city have an external annual audit of our financial statements, and that the Local Government Commission also requires that those results are presented to you on a timely basis. So Mr. Goggerty is here this afternoon to present those results and will be available for any questions that you have as we go along. So Dan, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you and good evening. So what we have here is I'm going to go through our PowerPoint slide of the results of the audit overall. So first, just want to let you all know, so we'll go over first the results of the audit, and then I'll go through some of the other required communications. There's a number of items in here that we're required to communicate each year. A lot of those haven't changed year to year, but we are required to give you that every year. First off, we audited the financial statements in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards. We also audited the financial statements in accordance with government auditing standards. This is all in which to form an opinion that the financial statements, a reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free from material misstatement. We also audit the compliance as it relates to the federal and state dollars that the city spends to ensure that you are in compliance with those grant agreements and the requirements under uniform grant guidance. We issued unmodified opinions in all cases. We issued an unmodified opinion on the financial statements and also on compliance with those federal and state dollars. In that unmodified opinion is also known as a clean opinion, which is the highest level opinion that we can give under our auditing standards. This slide here is just communicating to you all that we are in charge of giving an opinion on compliance, and we do test internal controls, but we do not provide an opinion on the effectiveness of those internal controls. In regards to our audit, if we identify any issues with internal controls, we are to report those either as a material weakness or a significant deficiency if it rises to those levels. And here is just a definition of material weakness being one where a material error could go undetected and not reported or not corrected in a timely manner. And then we also have, and then the significant deficiency being one less than a material weakness, but still important enough for us to communicate to you all. And we noted one material weakness in our audit, which I will go over in the next slide. And this did not relate to the financial statements. This related to your single audit. This related to the Federal Grant Emergency Rental Assistance Program, in which you have a subrecipient that oversees your funding and oversees the spending of this grant money, in which you had monitored them in the past year, but did not have a process in place to continue to monitor them throughout the whole granting program. And so we had identified that as a material weakness in internal control that needed to be corrected, in which management had already developed their corrective action plan and is included within the annual comprehensive financial report. And that will also be, that won't be part of any letters to the LGC because this is governed by.
Can you tell us what the amounts are that are affected by that particular weakness? What's the magnitude of that problem?
Sure. So I think overall, if you have the CFSA, I think it was about 13 million. All the money that was provided to the subrecipient was the entire amount of expenditures. And so you would normally sample that on a sample basis. So you wouldn't be looking at every single dollar value of those expenditures. But we found no review of the current year expenditures in totality. And so it was $3.8 million, that program.
And there wasn't a finding of a misappropriation of funds or anything. You're just talking about controls, right?
Correct. And controls over just monitoring what they were doing. The subrecipient that you work with is a subrecipient that has their own single audit, and they did not have any findings in their single audit of this program. So their auditors would be looking at this in more detail, making sure that people are receiving eligible funds, in which they noted no issues in their audit. Our finding is just the city's responsibility to monitor and make sure themselves that this subrecipient is also spending the funds wisely at the same time.
All right, just wanted to make sure to understand that. Appreciate it.
On this slide here, we have corrected and uncorrected misstatements, in which we had no corrected misstatements, which means basically what we audited and received from finance is what you see in the final financial report that has been delivered to you all, that we had no made corrections based on our audit. We did have two uncorrected adjustments. And so the first one being an understatement of cash and accounts payable by approximately 3.7 million and 1 million related to the general fund and public transit fund. And this related to accrued payroll that had been recorded as being paid before it actually was paid a day later after the year end. And the next one there is an overstatement of beginning net position, current year expenses of approximately $27.7 million related to the water sewer fund. This is related to capital projects that were no longer viable and needed to be written off, that should have been written off in a prior year. But I will note this was identified by finance and presented to us, and we determined with finance, we agreed that it was immaterial in terms of not having to go back and restate the prior year balance and just to run it through the current year. These next few slides are a lot of those required communications I alluded to earlier. First of which is that Note 1 includes your significant accounting policies. Your Note 1 also includes the adoption of a new accounting standard this year, which is the subscription-based information technology arrangements, which is basically any software that the city owns that they have a commitment to pay a vendor for more than 1 year are required to be reported as an asset and a liability. It is very similar to the reporting of leases that was adopted in the prior year. And so basically it's really a balance sheet only item with minimal effect on your income statement and minimal effect on your fund balance or net position. In terms of related parties, we are looking at any related parties that rise to a level that we need to look at as part of our audit. We've noted no issues with any arm's length transactions as it relates to related parties, and we noted no related parties that weren't already presented to us by management. If we find anything that we deem to be significant or unusual, and significant or unusual being outside the normal course of business and otherwise unusual due to the nature, timing, or size of the adjustment, we have to make you aware of that. We noted nothing during our audit that we believe met this definition. As part of any financial statement audit, estimates are an integral part of the development of the financial statements. And so there's a number of things I have listed here: allowance for doubtful accounts, depreciation, actuarial assumptions as it relates to your pension and other post-employment benefits. These specialists or third-party data is being used by management to develop certain financial items, and we are looking to make sure that the items are consistent with the previous year and also are relatable to what we would expect. And other things that management may use is historical collection trends, billing dates, estimated useful life, or those actuarial valuations. I have no particular disclosure to point out as a specific disclosure to draw your attention to, but the financial statement disclosures are neutral, clear, and consistent. In terms of an audit, we sometimes will provide non-attest service. The test services being audit services. So this would be anything outside of the audit that we might provide to management. And one thing we do here is we enter in the data for the data collection form. This is the form that is submitted to the federal government that outlines what we audited for the year on federal grants, so that the different federal agencies can all see the information in a nice, neat manner and see what has been spent. Management has the proper skills, knowledge, and expertise to oversee these services, and ultimately they are the ones who certify and review before it gets submitted to the federal clearinghouse. We are not aware of any instances of any issues with independence with our firm. A couple more things here. We had no difficulties encountered as part of our audit. We had no disagreements with management. If we have any internal auditor consultations within our firm, we are now required to communicate those to you all. And we did have one related to the required consultation related to the IT event during the year. And then we have the manager representation letter, which is dated October 31st, the date of the issued financial statements, that was signed by management. Other required communications, if management was consulting on anything outside of our team, whether they be shopping for an opinion of some sort from another auditing or accounting firm, we make you aware of that. There were no such instances of that. There were no other findings or issues noted that we didn't already talk about. There were no, as of the date of this presentation, no fraud or illegal acts or violations of law or regulations were noted. And there are no events that caused a going concern for the city. These limit out basically our responsibilities on other information that either precede the financial statements or follow the notes of the financial statements. Required supplementary information such as your management discussion and analysis section, and then the pension schedules in the back are done by management. We look over that information, but we provide no assurance over that information presented. And then supplementary information we have here is any of those back schedules that show the combining fund statements or budget to actual schedules. We look to make sure they are consistent with the information provided in the audited financial statements, but we do not provide any assurance other than in relation to opinion on that. And the last one here is other information, which is your introductory schedules at the very top of the annual comprehensive financial report. And then also in the back, the statistical information. We look over that information, but we do not provide express an opinion or any assurance on it. Here's a list of the upcoming accounting standards that will be applicable for the city next year. 99 and 100 not being significant to the city for the next year. We don't believe that will have a significant impact. Although 100 does require now a restatement when a fund goes from major to non-major. So you might see changes in your fund balance because of that, due to that standard. But that, we think, is the biggest change that you might see going forward. And then you have 101 compensated absences, which relates to your accrued vacation and sick leave, in which there could be a potential that sick leave may need to be accrued as well, that it hasn't in the past. But we're still looking through that standard, making sure, based on the standard and the rules applied, what the outcome of that would be based on city policy. Those local government commission, we do have performance indicators concern that the local government commission has set as standards that we need to look at for every municipality within the state of North Carolina. And I'm happy to say that we had no financial performance indicators of concern noted based on those factors that they outlined. Everything was submitted within it was going to be submitted within 5 months of the fiscal year end. The fund balance, general fund, is positive fund balance. You have a budgeted tax levy that's your budgeted amounts for taxes did not exceed what you collected for the year. You have an effective pre-audit process with no pervasive budget violations as part of that process. You have no late debt service payments, no violations of any covenants for your revenue bonds and such, and no statutory violations within the financial report. So with that, I'll open it up if anyone has any additional questions.
Thank you. I would turn it over to Ms. Smith. Do you have any comments that you would like to make as our finance director? All right, open this for questions and discussion. I have Ms. Watlington, followed by Ms. Ashmira.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just have a quick question for my own understanding. I want to make sure that I understand slide 8, where it's got the uncorrected misstatements.
Yep.
So is there or is there not a material weakness associated with the misstatement? Am I misunderstanding that there would be a corresponding weakness that would then be exploited in an uncorrected misstatement?
There's not with these. I know the amounts seem to be large, but for a city your size, we have a certain materiality threshold that we use based on a percentage of certain aspects, whether it be your assets, whether it be your revenues, expenditures, and based on that, looking at that from a material standpoint, it didn't meet the level of materiality for any of the funds that were affected.
Thank you.
Ms. Ashmira?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I did have an opportunity to speak with Mr. Gogorty a couple of months ago now regarding our financials and see as the chair of the Budget Governance and Intergovernmental Committee if I had any concerns. I had shared with him I had no concerns. As you clearly see, there are no material misstatements, and our financial are in great shape. Obviously, there are some of this is not material, but this has been already modified as, this was already reviewed by the Budget Governance Committee earlier. So, and Mr. Gogarty has been our auditor for as long as I remember, 6, 7 years, at least I've been on council. I know he has moved on from, now I think he's a director. He used to be a manager or associate, so congratulations on your promotion as our external auditor, but clearly, I think we are in great shape. We have the great finance team, thanks to our CFO and the entire team for the great work. I know we had, as one of the largest city, we had huge ARPA fund allocation, and usually in the audit, you will see when you have that much amount, I mean, we're talking about millions and millions of dollars coming in multiple phase, you'd see that would be the scope of the audit. And I know there were several audit steps that were being taken as part of that. And despite all of that, they didn't find anything material. I think that just speaks to the great team and processes that we have in place.
Mr. Driggs?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was very pleased to note that you had not had any material disagreements with management, because I have those all the time. So good job. Well done. I just want to emphasize, following what the chair said, that we should not underestimate the significance of this report. You don't take it for granted. The city has been well managed financially for a long time. It starts to feel routine. Look at other cities. It doesn't always look like this. So once again, congratulations to the manager and the staff. I would like to add that to what was said. I did have one question. In the audit, you make pretty clear, and in fact, you've made increasingly clear over recent years what you do and don't do, as it were. So in your mind, is there any area where we should commission extra work or that we need to watch out for in terms of potential exposures or risks or anything like that? Or do you feel that the scope of your work gives us comfort that something couldn't pop up?
I feel that in tandem with us and internal audit that you have on staff, that the scope of what needs to be looked at the city is being looked at. Where we are looking at maybe the smaller, what we would call smaller items or things of lesser materiality based on our large materiality numbers, internal audit is there behind us to look at those items a lot of the times. And we do talk with internal audit as part of our process every year and get an understanding of what they're doing. And they always ask us the question as well of what could we be looking at. And when we have things come up and we say, hey, we've seen this trend in the external audit or something going on, you might want to look here, you might want to do this. So we try to work in tandem with them, but I think between our external and the internal audit, things are being covered that need to be covered.
Thank you. I do appreciate that. And having worked with Cherry Beckert one way or another for, I think, 18 years now, including nonprofits, I really appreciate the excellence of your work. So thank you for that.
And Mr. Driggs, I also wanted to add that in recent years, the Finance Department has created what we call as an internal controls division. So we have a small staff of people that are focused just on looking at controls and improving those controls. So they sort of work on the very beginning before internal audit, which is then before the external audit. So we feel like we have multiple layers built in related to our controls.
Good job. Thank you.
Ms. Anderson?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree with Mr. Driggs. This is a very strong audit, and it comes as a result of having really good internal controls, and it's certainly something that we should not take for granted. I did have a question on slide 20 when you talked about the compensated absences, and you were mentioning sick leave.
Yep.
Will that accrual process mirror vacation time, or will there be a different accrual process for sick leave?
It would be similar to vacation time, but I do want to stress that we're still under the very preliminary of just kind of looking at it. The Government Accounting Standards Board, GASB, had wanted to, rather than make it be very clear in terms of do this, do that, they wanted to make it more, a little more conceptual in nature. And so they added some language in there that might tend to think that sick leave should be accrued. In my personal opinion, sick leave is really not payable out to the employee, so it really should not be accrued. It's mostly used for credible service at the very end for retirement. But based on what the GASB has out there, there's some chain of thought that that should be accrued regardless, depending on how it's worded in your policy. So I think one thing here is getting a little bit more clarity from the GASB as they will release implementation guides throughout the years, getting more clarity on this standard, on what they're meaning and wanting from this, and then looking at the city's policy and then making sure they align with what is actually a liability or not a liability.
Okay, great, because that was my follow-up question, because sick leave is not typically paid out when employees leave, and it's also something that you don't particularly plan for either, so an accrual process for that, we just really need to be mindful about that as it relates to our employees. So I'd like to see what GASB comes out with this year on that.
And try not to get into the details of this, but it's basically they're saying if you have an employee that's going to use sick leave next year, you accrue for that sick leave. Well, how do you administratively know that, and how do you account for that? That's not conceptually sometimes
on the front end.
work. Yeah, how do you? Yeah, so it's estimating that and getting into that, but that's why we just need more information to make sure and see what the policy is compared to that.
Great, thank you, Madam Mayor.
All right. I think all of us that sit around this table are very much appreciative of the, first, the audit that we have at the end of this year, but more importantly, to the effort that is taking place every day to make this audit what it is today. And so we know we have a great team. I like to think of this as something that our city does very well. When you start talking about the changes and recognize we're a $3 billion operation, this is pretty significant. And so congratulations to the manager and the team that he's put together. It is one of the most important aspects of what we can do in other respects, because without that ability to have this kind of audit, to have that kind of ability to have reserves and fund balances, the ability to maintain a AAA credit rating is absolutely essential to the kind of growth and expectations we have for this community. So thank you, and Mr. Jones, thank you as well. I guess Teresa lets you come in every now and again, just look at the computer, and then she tells you to go back upstairs. So thank you very much. And thank you to Cherry Beckert. We really appreciate the work that you guys do for us.
Thank you.
So with that, we will now go to the City Council calendar for 2024, and we're going to have our city clerk present on this one. I'm sorry. Thank you.
I'm pulling it up for you. Oh, it's PDF, hold on. PDF. It's only in PDF. This is what we have. Okay. Thank you. Mouse.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you for allowing me to present briefly the proposed 2024 calendar that is at your places. I believe a copy has been placed at your desk and also is on the screen for your viewing. In order to comply with the North Carolina Open Meetings Law notice requirements for city government, you will be asked to vote on this proposed council calendar or council meeting schedule as you do each calendar year. We are planning to have the calendar for a vote on your December 11th business agenda. And I'd like to take a few minutes this evening to review the calendar with you and highlight a few considerations for 2024. Moving forward into the new year, we are proposing to keep the regular meeting schedule consistent with this year's, more specifically on the first Mondays of the month to hold council committee meetings and then an evening committee discussion session. On the second Mondays to hold a business meeting, and then on the third Mondays for your zoning meetings, and on the fourth Mondays to hold a second business meeting with a public forum. This is consistent with the current 2023 schedule. Exceptions for Mondays due to holidays or conferences are noted on the draft at your seats, but I would like to draw your attention to an exception for January the 8th. For January the 8th, there are exceptions being proposed. Typically, the first Monday of the month is for your council committees. However, due to the new year, we are proposing January 8th for committee meetings and a business meeting. The first council committee meetings of the new year will take place on January the 8th, and then the time typically used for action reviews from 5 to 6:30 would be allocated for committee discussions, and following that, we're proposing a business meeting. Also of note for 2024, the majority of the budget meetings are being moved to Mondays, and this is to help manage your on-site schedules to predominantly Mondays to free up the remaining days of the week for community and constituent meetings and other commitments that you may have. The one exception is going to be the straw votes meeting on May 30th. Is being proposed on for a Thursday instead of a Monday, and this is to accommodate time needed to cost out any additional adjustments that may be proposed during the Monday, May 20th budget adjustment session. So in addition, based on council feedback for this year, we are proposing that the summer schedule provide for no formal meetings to be scheduled within the month of July to allow for scheduling of summer commitments. And those are the highlights of the proposed 2024 calendar. And as I mentioned, it'll come before you for a vote on December the 11th. And I'll entertain any questions or feedback or anything you might have.
I wanted to say that we're just beginning to see this, and I know that there might be questions, and if there are questions that we can't address today, we certainly have time next week to do so. So I want to recognize Ms. Mayfield.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First question, actually, Mayor, is for you. We're assuming that all of the current committee structure, that's the committee structure that's going to be maintained into 24-25?
I have spoken with, I think, everyone except Ms. Ajmira, and I think we've called, and, you know, it's hard. She's got kids, and I don't, so she's busier than I am. So I wanted to say that, yes, my goal is to keep things as stable as this calendar would be so that people would have the opportunity for those that need to have work time as well as other commitments that they have made, that we would pretty much stay in the same position.
Okay.
And the committees would be the same.
Thank you. Ms. Kelly, for the first recommendation of January 8th, since the new year comes in on Monday the 1st, why would we not move the meeting to Tuesday, January the 2nd? Like sometimes if it's a holiday, instead of having the meeting on Monday, we would have it on Tuesday so that we don't have a full day that starts from 10 a.m. that very well can go into 9 to 10 p.m. that evening.
I will have to check with the budget office on that particular recommendation, but it is the day after a holiday, so that consideration is factored into that as well.
So Monday is actual New Year's Day, but typically we observe the day after as well, the 2nd. Okay, because I know it's a little off because next year is leap year.
Right.
So the dates are shuffled around a little. I would like to see if it's to the pleasure of my colleagues for us to look at potentially another alternative, because that is going to be a really hard day, the way this looks for January the 8th, to try to have the quorum and attendance that's going to be needed, starting a full day and going late into the evening versus normally we would get done probably about 7:30, 8 at the latest. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Kelly.
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
All right, so let me make sure that I understand that you're suggesting that we have a meeting on February the 2nd?
Actually, Mayor, I'm wondering if we can,
February the
January.
so this is a January 8th meeting, the first of the
Right.
year, but I'm wondering if we can break it up, either have our council business meeting and readjust our committee meetings, or vice versa, so as not to try to do all on that night, because that would just be a very difficult day for a lot of people going into the new year, for my colleagues that do go to work to try to know that they still going to have to maintain all of that, to see if maybe we can split it up. Worst case scenario, either have the committee meetings only or have the council business meeting, opposed to having the full day starting at 10 a.m.
I understand. I think a lot of this would depend on the management team pulling out the business items that would be important, and so you could have a meeting, and the committee meetings would be, I think that we could probably make that adjustment if we saw the need to, based upon what items would be on a council agenda, or a business meeting. But let's put that in the list and see where we can have some conversation and figure that out.
Yes, ma'am.
All right?
And the final question, do we block out the time? So we do have on here that January 21st to the 24th, that's still going to be identified as our annual strategy meeting will be, because normally the 22nd, that Monday, would be our public forum. So we're saying we're going to push because we don't normally have a meeting on the 5th Monday, which will be the 29th. So we're not going to have a public forum on the 22nd, because January 2024, January 22nd, Monday night, falls during the week of our annual strategy meeting.
Right.
Well, the public forum is
It's always
proposed to be January 8th, but if we break that out to a separate meeting, we have to have a public forum sometime in January. So we'll look at those dates and see how we can break that out and make that happen. But there will be a public forum in January.
Right.
So, okay, I'll follow up. Thank you, Ms. Kelly.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I do know that our policy requires or states the public forum on the 4th meeting, so we'll just see. All right, any other questions? We will have some time to review this. Ms. Ajmira?
Yes, I mean, this is a lot of information to just.
It is.
I might have some changes, and we can connect next week so that I have an opportunity to review this. So I'll reach out to you, Ms. Kelly, and also
Sure.
you. Thank you.
Sure.
Yes. Mr. Winston?
Well, I have no bearing over this calendar whatsoever. The only suggestion I would, again, hope you guys consider is when you do have your annual council strategy meeting, that you really take time to do it together. And I would suggest that you spend that time away from this building doing it. It worked really well when we were able to honestly even get out the city and do it. And we benefited throughout terms, and where we didn't, were not able to do that, we paid the price. So I'd encourage you to consider that time between January 21st and 24th that you really get out, get to a place where you guys can operate as units in an effective manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Jones?
Thank you, Mayor, members of council, and thank you, Ms. Kelly. So just a couple of things, and it may be stating some things that you've stated, Ms. Kelly, but it's been a good partnership with this. What we tried to do was learn from a lot that we discovered over this past year and tried to concentrate meetings on Mondays, not only just, let's say, the strategy session, but even some of the budget workshops, because we were having difficulties with attendance. So we thought that if we moved everything to a Monday, there's this clarity, but there's one exception, and Ryan and I arm wrestles, he beat me, that we have, I think, straw votes on a Thursday as opposed to a Monday. One of the reasons that the 8th is there the way that it is, and I totally agree with the Mayor Pro Tem about the annual strategy meeting. We will talk with the council members. I think sometimes you get an ad hoc group together, Mayor, about getting away, being extremely intentional, especially around our capital improvement plan and infrastructure, and the CIP and the bonds, and we could eat up maybe a day just with that. But one of the reasons we had the 8th the way that it was is because it is coming out of the holidays, and it will be a few weeks since you have met, and I just wanted to be careful that we're able to we want to be careful that while it's a very long day, it gives us a bit more prep time, because some of the things that we would be talking about on the 8th would include our strategies around safety and some of the things that have been left in the committees up to that point. So I just wanted to tag team with Ms. Kelly about some of the thought process around this.
Mr. Bakari?
Yeah, so I remember the thought process that went into figuring out how to repurpose the first Mondays of the month. And I think it was a half successful experiment and half unsuccessful. I think the half of centralizing all of it where we're all around on one day, I think makes a lot of sense for us, probably a little tough for staff given that it's on a Monday with the prep and stuff in the week before. I think what we still haven't figured out is how, when the full council gathers that evening, the function of that meeting. Because, Mayor, you've said it 100 times, and it still hasn't taken hold. It's not supposed to be a readout. Like, we can do that in an email. And what we end up doing is getting an email readout, and then someone reads it to us. So I think that if there's one major thing to rethink, it's that evening first Monday meeting. I still think there's value, but I just, we've attempted for over a year and a half now to figure that out, and it just hasn't worked. So some suggestions of things to think about before we vote on this. And again, we're going to vote on that schedule, and it's going to be there. I don't know that that's the critical path of figuring this out. But I still think there's value to having the committees meet all together in a day. But perhaps bringing that group together almost as like a hybrid, it's one big committee for a couple topics. Maybe it's like, we go back and forth every other month. 1 month this is the major infrastructure investment, infrastructure strategy committee. And then the next month, it's the public safety committee. Some of the things that deserve all of our attention, they're once a month. It's the big committee meeting where we all get down to some of the basics of what we're going to do. And when you think about infrastructure and public safety, we could go back and forth on that for the next month or the next year 6 times. And so it puts a little bit of a heavier burden on staff. I think the lesson learned from before, even in changing that, is it still can't be like a readout meeting. Right. It's got to be a meeting that people do some offline work, maybe some committee stuff that happened earlier help input it. But we should all be reading the report outs of those committee readouts, and that's our update. And this big committee thing is I struggled. I'm not as, glass half full as I used to be. I don't know if you guys have noticed that. But I'd like to think we could figure out how to whiteboard and brainstorm and do something on those topics where it's one topic a month and then it just rotates. But there's got to be some way, I think, where we structure how we come into that meeting, what we do in it, and what we take out of it. So just some food for thought.
I agree with you. I think that we've struggled with how do we share information that really helps build something that's stronger and bigger and better. And as you've talked about this, one of the things that I have thought about is the idea of we choose the priorities that we are going to work on, and perhaps the committees are doing the legwork to make those things happen. But are we really doing an assessment that we have seen? So perhaps this is kind of consistent with what you're saying, is that we actually take our priorities, and instead of it being a committee report out, which is supposed to be the work that we're doing, we talk about where are we on our priorities? What do we need? What are we missing? Where is there a gap that of things that we're doing? Because so often we end up in a situation, but I think open to any discussion should be the idea of how to make better use of that time, because it is so much of, let's just read it through. We need more thinking. We need to have more opportunities to hear what other communities are doing. We need to hear from the people that really are in charge of administrating some of these programs and saying, is it working? Do you see? What are we learning? And how do we adjust to what we can learn? So I completely want to say this is an open place, but I have a lot of people that have...
Just one follow-up, sorry, before I close out. I agree with you, and I'll take another broken record from Mayor Pro Tem Winston over there. I think the other big magic thing in this is we've got to structure it into policy outcomes, because it would be too dangerous for us to sit there and try to do staff's job. So how can, I think, and Mr. Manager, I think this is a good exercise for you guys as a leadership team to go down and really come up with, if this is a board level policy designing group that needs to have inputs around let's say two of our most important things, infrastructure and public safety, like how would you structure that? So we're sitting down analyzing what policies are broken, what policies are missing, and we're doing that in a way where like we're jumping light years ahead each one of those monthly sessions like that. I think that could, and we're not losing it in a way where like only 5 people are doing it and then we wait another month for another readout. Like that's why this has to be scoped perfectly to work, but maybe it could work.
All right, so I saw several hands. I think I saw Mr. Driggs, and then I saw Ms. Ajmira, and then I saw Ms. Anderson. Mr. Graham, I saw after I saw, and Ms. Watlington before Mr. Graham, actually. So
Mayor, we're just going to say
all right, so we can start with that and go this way and then come back around. Okay, Mr. Driggs.
Thank you, Mayor. So I agree with that. I think it's actually useful if the chairs could provide for the full group a very short summary of what the topics were in their meeting. We talked about this, we talked about this, we talked about this, just for awareness, because it's actually, for me at least, a little hard to keep track of what's going on in the committees. That doesn't need to take much time. And otherwise, I just wanted to mention, we have a tendency during regular council meetings to stray into discussions that are actually inappropriate on those occasions. And everybody then agrees, hey, we ought to have more time to talk to each other. We don't get to talk to each other. And then we get into that Monday night, and nothing particularly significant happens. So I think the idea that we're more intentional about what the topics are going to be on Monday night and not expect them to flow from the committee reports makes a lot of sense. So trees, for example, Ms. Johnson, congestion, the ordinances, whether we've, all of our public safety ordinances, the density conversation in connection with, there are these topics which we know are kind of out there somewhere. The fact that we're getting so many petitions that are recommended for approval and do not align with so there are a bunch of things we could talk about, but that has to be kind of programmed a little bit. And again, I think consistent with what was just said, so we understand in advance that there is going to be a topic of discussion. identified from the conversations that we're having in meetings and from what's going on, and then there's a little bit of structure around that. There's like a memo or kind of some suggestions as to the policy. I mean, I talked to Ms. Craig, for example, about the trees and said, could you tell us what other cities are doing? We don't have to wait to see the thing. We can start thinking now about how we want to manage, what the tools are at least, to manage those trees. So I think I'm just in step with what's been said, but one of the benefits of that would be that we avoid those off-topic or conversations in other meetings, because the zoning committee, the zoning meeting should not be a policy forum. Thank you.
Thank you. I really think this is consistent with the idea of what are our strategic priorities, and are we talking about them in a way that actually benefits change and policy development. So policy development is a key part of it. So Ms. Anderson and then Ms. Watlington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I absolutely agree that we can repurpose that first Monday meeting time to do something more intentional. And I agree that we need more time to speak together, but I also feel like we need the opportunity to hear more outside voices. So, it's rare, and from a board perspective, we should have the opportunity to hear what best practices are, what other cities are doing who have gone through what we're going through as it relates to growth and infrastructure. We should bring subject matter experts in who are not necessarily from the city or the region, so we can learn from both their successes but also mistakes. And I think this would be a great time during that evening, centered as it relates to policy and what we see out in front of us, if we bring some of those SMEs, those subject matter expert voices to the table to help guide the shaping of the policy. I think that would be great food for thought, but we will end up with a better answer overall as it relates to the policy that we stand up.
Ms. Watlington.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree with Councilmember Bakari's comments. To add to that, I think part of this discussion is about policy, part of it is about time back to strategic priorities, but I think there is an underlying conversation that we probably need to have in terms of our identity as a board. We know that from an operations day-to-day standpoint that we have professional staff that handles that, but I think there's an opportunity for us to consider ourselves as more of a working board beyond just the advisory piece. I know Mayor Pro Tem is looking at me like I've been saying this for 6 years. I agree with you on this, I do. Because to the extent that these Monday meetings that are planned in advance, that tie back to our strategic priorities, that connect to policy change, to the extent that those can function as working sessions rather than hearing, that shouldn't be the first time we hear the information, because if it's going to be something substantial coming out of it, that requires some level of prep work, which may require one of us to take the lead on doing that investigation. So I think that we could really make something of this work session. Well, what I'm calling a work session, I think that it requires a more active role from each one of the council members, so that when we get to the meeting, it's about the doing rather than the learning at the meeting. Thank you.
All right. We'll start with Mr. Graham and then come on around here. Okay, Mr. Graham, Ms. Ashmere, you get to close us out.
Yeah, thank you. I don't mean to be redundant, but I totally agree. When I looked at the council committee discussions, the first thing I wrote down is it even necessary, right? Because it was really redundant of the meetings we had before, especially if there was a hot topic issue. We began to debate it at the committee meeting, then we re-debated it again that afternoon, which led to confusion and chaos in some cases. And so this is even needed, right? And so I understand the brainstorming about how we can use the time. But I don't think we need to be meeting just to be meeting, unless there's a useful purpose for the time that we can come up with. And I don't think we should have to create something just to say that we got to fill this time slot. Either there's a useful period for the time or there isn't. I think the committee discussions can rest on its own merit. A memo would do the same as an update, and for me is how the council utilize our time for the next 2 years? Do we start on time? Do we have effective meetings that we operate as a high effective board, right? So let's be effective and efficient, not only in terms of this particular category, council committee discussions, but throughout today and throughout the year in terms of how do we make sure that we operate as a high-performing board and that we manage our time in an effective and efficient manner. I think last year, and we really struggled from my perspective, in terms of time management and being effective and efficient. And that's something that I hope that we can change as we move forward into to a new council and a new program year for the next 2 years. So is it even needed?
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. I would answer your question, Mr. Graham. It is needed, and I would agree with Mr. Bakari and Ms. Watlington. I'll just give you my kind of insight because I spent Mondays here most of all of those days. I think we need to commit to those meetings between the meetings, as Ms. Watlington was talking about. You can't rely on staff to do this work for a couple reasons. First, those first Mondays are intense, and it's kind of all hands on deck, everybody preparing everything from the beginning of the day to the end of the day. And what they're preparing is what guidance they've already received from council, right? So whatever has basically 6 votes, or whatever policy direction that they've been given in the past. So what we're kind of talking about of the things that we want to be working on or how we want to be working on, it's not really a job that staff can do because you by nature don't have those 6 voices telling them to do something. So they can't figure it out for us. This has to be something that council, as Ms. Watlington was getting at, however we decide to form and function, and whether it's the committee chairs or whatever groups of the group, have to commit to talking to each other, figuring this out week to week. I will say not even for that meeting after the meeting on the first Mondays, but for the work that goes into committees. Something that I noticed was that at points in time, there wasn't actually a lot of policy work getting done in committees. There was a lot of information being presented, and therefore that was kind of the problem when we came back to those evening sessions. We didn't have anything to give our colleagues for us to work on together so we can kind of critically think and come together. So I think that, I guess what I'm trying to say is that there needs to be however council decides to parse out its leadership and a way to effectively communicate between the whole body of the 11, it's going to take a commitment between Mondays that group of council members is working together diplomatically to figure this out. And we've done this from time to time, whether it be around arts, whether it be around Safe Charlotte, whether it be in intergovernmental stuff that we've done. We have examples of it, but we need to kind of commit to it in our everyday work path. Like Ms. Watlington said again, the way that the form and function of this body has to be, I think, reclassified in a way that really does match the moment in time that we're at and we're heading to with the size and scope of work that needs to get done. Monday, I was a big skeptic on the first Mondays. It is a framework for something that can work well, but only if the 11 council members are committed to figuring out amongst themselves how to bring this whole organization along with it. And that's something we haven't done during this term with it. But it's new. It's a weird term. I think you guys have a great opportunity to do something really great.
I appreciate that. I think one of the biggest questions that we have is we often work on projects and not policy, and text and not intent. So things like that stand in our way. So it might be even good for the council committee chairs to go through where are the policy documents for this? I mean, today we pulled up one, and, we're using it this afternoon or this evening when we get there. But let's go ahead, Ms. Mayfield, and then Ms. Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. You took some of the thoughts that I had regarding the policy discussion should happen in committee. I did hear and I support the idea of that Councilmember Anderson shared regarding subject experts. I would say, for me, that will be in the committee, not in that broader, because that is one of the biggest challenges, the fact that we do not have the chance to come and talk together when we are doing just this report out. And I will also say that for the years ago, once upon a time, long time ago, when I was around as a district rep, I liked the fact that the committee chair and vice chair were in on every conversation, so that there was a clear understanding of what the expectations is. This year, a very short time period, it has felt more like just staff reporting out to us and us not really being able to get into, okay, what is the policy language? So looking at some of the work that we were doing in housing, I still can't go into a community and tell them, yeah, we started a conversation around tiny homes 8 years ago. Where are we today on it? We're talking about ADU and some other things, but we haven't specifically delved into how that can play out and what it looks like. So I think moving forward, but I know we only have one new council member that will be sworn in a couple of weeks. I still would like to make sure that before we collectively make a decision on this, that we include our newly elected council member-elect in this decision-making so that they can see this calendar as well and be able to have some input on this conversation. But I definitely support the logic that I think we individually and in small group have had discussions about what we would like to see out of our committee discussions, and I think you're getting a chance to hear that now as we're looking at this new calendar, so it goes beyond just that first Monday and what it looks like. It's really how effective can we be when we're in these sessions, so that we are looking at policy. What do we have? What do we need to create? What do we need to adapt in order to address the goals? Thank you.
I want you to know that I thought the expectation was the chair and the vice chair met with the team or the staff. So if it happens, I'm not
We can
sure
just
why it
clearly
doesn't.
state that on the front.
All right. Ms. Johnson, do you want to add anything to the conversation?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I love this conversation. When you talk about projects versus policies, it does feel that that we are always given lots of information. And I think I've shared that with you, Mr. Jones. We're presented with lots of information to the point where at the end of the meeting, seems to be exacerbation when there's a discussion by council. I think that council should have opportunities to get into the weeds, and when you bring up these subjects, they not be considered inappropriate. When do we have those discussions? So I think this is a great discussion, and if I peel back the layer just a little, in our budget, we talked about bringing someone on full-time as a liaison, maybe between the council and staff. So if we could get an update with that, that would help with as we're completing projects. Ms. Mayfield, you talked about, you had a discussion about tiny homes in 2000, would you say 2008? Maybe? Okay. When I came on board, February 2020, I remember talking about the shipping containers. So there's been lots of discussion. So how are we closing those gaps? And another thing that we talked about, and it went to committee in April of 2021, is allowing less than 6 members of council to put something on the agenda instead of having a vote before the vote. So these are the kind of things that kind of get lost when we don't have time to come together and have discussions. So I love this discussion. I like what Mr. Bakari said. I think he gave some very concrete recommendations when he talked about safety and infrastructure. Those are two huge issues in our community. And if you go on any of our social media forums or hear from the public, that's what the public wants us to talk about. And I know, Mayor, you and I had a discussion about safety discussions when we were talking about the new committees. So I agree with what Mr. Bakari said. If we could come together as a working group and actually have some time to discuss policies and have some time to really get down in the weeds of those conversations and make changes. That's what our voters expect from us. So thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess, I've been here for a while now, and a year, which feels like an eternity. And I guess what I've collected in the year being a part of this body, and I've said it since I walked in the door, and I think a lot of the comments from my perspective lend itself to a capacity issue. A lot of what I see as far as deliverables are concerned from a council member perspective, we don't have the proper infrastructure as a council body to really, in my opinion, carry out some of what we're talking about. One human being who, from a district perspective, has a responsibility potentially of 125,000 plus residents. And we all share a person with someone else. So at any given moment, one human being is able to, and ourselves, we share that. So some of this feels clerical, in addition to constituent relations, in addition to, maintaining relationships in the community, in addition to now, the conversation that sounds as though we should be immediately adept at what policy should be implemented from a citywide perspective. I've just never felt as though the offices are structured as offices. We are structured as humans who hold a lot, juggle a lot of balls, and we have for a very long time, in my opinion, made it look to the public that it's easy, and it is immensely hard to hold it. And you don't even have to be a mother with kids. You could be a single person with no children, and this is immensely hard. It is much harder if you got children, male or female. And so before I say that we need to now do more, I think it, in my opinion, is time as a body to press pause, in my opinion, and look comprehensively at this body and decide what it means to actually have a district in the 15th largest city in the country. And how do we conduct business, and how do we then, start a policy discussion, and how is there a continuum in, like some of the examples with some of the people who've been around longer. They say that they've, discussed things at some point in the past, and then for some reason or another, those conversations have never continued, or they fell off, or whatever the case. And I think if we were conducted as offices, I think some of that would be minimized. Not that it would disappear, because someone else would take this office and they would decide that something else would be important. The turnover rate, we get once again, right? In 1 year, I've ran 2 campaigns, right? I had someone chew me out literally like 2 weeks ago. And they were like, we can't get in contact with you, and da-da-da-da-da. And I'm like, well, and dare I go somewhere, and I post it on social media, that means that I'm like, I must be like Gallivan. And I'm like, no, actually, it was like 50 other places that I went. I just didn't post that on social media, right? And I do that myself, too. So, I mean, it's just, it's an immense amount for one human to hold, to go to the next level, because it's, in my opinion, time for us to look at ourselves comprehensively in what it means to be a large city. And one human with, like I said, especially from a district perspective, 125,000 people. We share someone, I share with Tariq Bakari one human being who I have to, look at my emails daily. My emails go with me, so, and then at the same time, I gotta lend myself to the mental, state and capacity that I need to hold the job. So, if people could see kind of behind the scenes and all the strings we gotta pull to make this job work, and then the ones that maybe have lighter loads than others can actually be punctual because there's no additional determinants. Like I said, before I say, let's be here every day, well, that's not even the structure of governance that we have. We call ourselves part-time, right? Right now, we're formulated as a part-time body. And people very happily tell me, oh, you're like full-time. And I'm like, but that's almost toxic. But, from my perspective, that's what I see. That's what I think. And I'd like to see us, before we run off and say that we need to now make it look even more structured without the proper infrastructure, I think we need to have an infrastructure conversation.
Thank you very much. Would you bring us home? And we're going to have one closed session item in here, in this room, before we leave. There's a second one that we will have to do after the meeting, but we will need to do the one in this room before we go downstairs. And I hope that all of you got my memo today about the resolution and all of that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, so
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a couple of things. But Councilmember Molina, thank you for acknowledging this job is difficult. I think it takes a lot of courage to say that. Whether you're a parent or not, this job is difficult, especially the decisions that we make. Every time you have to make a decision, it's tough because you're bound to make someone upset and you're bound to make someone happy. I do agree we do need more support, but I think that it's more to come. I'm sure we'll have discussion on that in coming weeks. But there are a couple of things that I was going through this calendar and I highlighted. First, our budget sessions, if you look at that, workshops, we had 1 to 5, and now that's been condensed to 2 to 5, which I'm fine with, but I think we have to be very mindful and focus on big topics, especially going into our budget cycle next year, focus on capital improvements, infrastructure, because I know that has been coming up for past several years. And not get caught up in the details. Otherwise, we won't be able to finish it in 2 hours, well, 3 hours, 2 to 5, because we have council meeting that starts right at 5. So I don't know if it's realistic, but I'm willing to give it a try. Let's. And if it doesn't work, we might have to revisit the schedule if 2 to 5 budget workshop time is not enough. I'm a half glass full person, so I'm willing to give it a try and see. We might be able to get it done in 2.5 hours. We never know. But I just want to set the realistic expectations going into this. There was a second item that I have, when it comes to committee meetings, if the committee structure stays the same, I would like to have a little bit of breathing period in between committee meetings, because I have back-to-back committee meetings, budget, and then 2 o'clock jobs and economic development. If we can have at least 30 minutes in between. Currently, there is scheduled 30 minutes, but that rarely happens. A lot of the times, we are taking up entire 2 hours. So if we can have just a little bit of breathing room, I think that would help. Because there's so much information being just thrown at us. So maybe 30 minutes in between committee meeting, I think would help. And there are a few more things that I have, but I'll come back to that because I know we are running out of time here. But those are the 2 items I would definitely like to see being addressed before this gets adopted. Thank you.
please feel free to send in information that we should have, your additional comments on this matter. We also can talk about this when we are at the council strategy session as well. Some of these things, like how we're structured and, how we choose to serve, we've talked about. And I think it's a matter of focus as well. So thank you, everyone, for this opportunity to speak clearly and your heart and head to make this possible. Before we...
I just have one last item. We have this council strategy meeting from January 21st to 24th. So does it start on Sunday?
Sunday, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Much like we've done in the past, Sunday evening has been an opportunity to travel, to get there, to have a meal, so that you start bright and early on Monday morning.
So do we know the location? The reason I ask, because I think we got to be mindful of those who have infants and toddlers at home. So got to be mindful of the location where we have that meeting so that we can travel back and take care of the babies at home. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm going to ask the city attorney to help us with the closed session portion of this.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And we're going to have the first closed session regarding Mr. Baker.
I need a motion to go into closed session to view a law enforcement recording pursuant to NCGS 143-318-11A10.
So moved, second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please raise your hands.
Aye.
All right, thank you very much. We're going- Thank you for your patience and consideration. This council is working very hard on trying to do a number of, take on a number of efforts, and sometimes our timing isn't always exact as we would choose it to be. But we're grateful that you're attending our meeting tonight. I want to call the business meeting of the Charlotte City Council to order. This is our November 27th meeting, and I'll begin with introductions, and we'll start with our city clerk.
Stephanie Kelly, City Clerk.
Dimple Ashmira, at large, and welcome.
Good evening, Marjorie Molina, District 5.
Welcome, I'm Renee Johnson, and I'm honored to serve District 4.
Good evening, LaWarner Mayfield, council member at large.
Marcus Jones, City Manager.
Bylaws, Mayor.
Braxton Winston, Mayor Pro Tem.
Malcolm Graham, District 2.
Ed Driggs, District 7.
Tara Bakari, District 6.
Good evening, Dante Anderson, District 1.
Patrick Baker, City Attorney.
The City Council begins our meeting with an expression of inspiration. This is something to solemnize our work, that we continue to work together and represent you with respect and dignity. And so tonight I will ask Mayor Pro Tem, who is experiencing his last formal meeting, a business meeting with us since he is going to run for another office. I would like to ask him to give his expressions, and then following that, if you choose to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, then we will have the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we'll go into our agenda. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor Lyles. Allow me to have just a moment of personal privilege. I'm grateful to have been given the privilege and responsibility of serving 6 years immersed in the democratic experiment of American self-governance. Municipal councils are the most direct form of democracy in action. Democracy provides us a vehicle that, despite our differences in cultural values, religious beliefs, personal particularities of distances of space, this vehicle provides us a tool to decide and take action for the good of the people. The councils that I've served on have gotten a lot done. While there is certainly a lot more to get done, democracy necessitates changes in governments, whether that be determined by time or the people. Tonight marks the last time I will officially take part in the decision-making on behalf of the people of Charlotte as a part of this government. This also marks the last meeting of this government in its current form. Next week, Charlotte will swear in a reconstituted form of our municipal government. I'm not going to lie, I've been thinking about this moment a lot over the past weeks and months. The recurring feelings and emotions I get considering this moment are not driven by the debates and arguments or the votes won or lost or the policy successful or failed. The feeling is gratitude that so many in our community provided me with the privilege of playing such a prominent role in this radical experiment of democracy. To that end, I would like to invoke the words of one of the most radical texts humankind has ever written, in a document I spent a lot of time with 7 or so years ago when I was trying to figure out the role I was supposed to be playing in our community, the Declaration of Independence. I hope you find this similar inspiration that this has given me and grounds us as to why we are all in this chamber this evening. When the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, in effect, their safety and prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Thank you.
Thank you. Please stand if you would like to for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Before we go to our public forum, I'd like to recognize the city manager.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. Tonight, we have a presentation that is long overdue, and I'd like to invite Ben Hitchens, who is a member of the American Planning Association Board of Directors. He's joined us to recognize the city and some of its efforts.
Thanks so much, Mayor Lyles, Manager Jones, members of the Charlotte City Council. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening. I had a wonderful tour this afternoon of the city with the planning staff, with Allison Craig and her team, and it was a delight to learn more about your beautiful city. My name is Ben Hitchens. I'm the chair of the APA Awards Jury and a member of the American Planning Association's Board of Directors. The American Planning Association is an organization of nearly 40,000 planners across the country and around the globe, dedicated to creating great communities for all. Every year, we present just 4 national awards to honor exceptional planning efforts across the country. One of them, the Burnham Award, is presented for a comprehensive plan that advances the science and art of planning. The award honors America's most famous planner, Daniel Burnham, known among other things for his work on the 1909 Plan of Chicago. Burnham believed deeply in the power of planning to improve the lives of people in our communities. The Charlotte Future 2040 Comprehensive Plan truly embodies this vision. Our awards jury noted that the Charlotte 2040 Plan is the product of extensive public outreach, which included innovative techniques ranging from the creation of board games to a TikTok challenge to engage stakeholders, with more than 40 different outreach techniques used in all. The result was engagement with thousands of voices in the city and a total of more than 500,000 interactions. The Charlotte 2040 Plan is also the product of thoughtful technical analysis, with particular attention to understanding and addressing systemic inequities and the needs of the city's most vulnerable populations. The result is a vision rooted in advancing equitable growth for current and future generations in the city, a key challenge and opportunity for communities everywhere in the 21st century. The awards jury observed that the 2040 Plan is a modern plan, beautifully displayed online with a logical structure, well-considered strategies, and compelling presentation that reflects the voices, needs, and desires of the Charlotte community. But the plan is just the beginning. The Charlotte 2040 approach includes strong implementation techniques, including an anti-displacement strategy and other measures that are being operationalized through the preparation of a unified development ordinance, 14 community area plans, and the work of a Neighborhood Equity and Stabilization Committee, an Equitable Development Commission, and a Community Benefits Task Force. An essential ingredient in this work to realize the community's vision is you, the City Council, to help fuel implementation with your leadership, guidance, and resources. We salute the collaborative efforts of the Charlotte community working together to make the city a vibrant and equitable hub of commerce, culture, and community. and to develop a plan that we are proud to hold up as an example for other places across the country and around the globe to learn from and replicate. And so, on behalf of the American Planning Association, it is my great pleasure to recognize the City of Charlotte, North Carolina, with our 2023 Daniel Burnham National Planning Award for its Charlotte Future 2040 Comprehensive Plan, and to present this recognition to the Honorable Mayor Lyles.
Thank you. I accept this award on behalf of the Charlotte City Council. Of course, I would like to say that it was a unanimous vote, but it wasn't. I like to say that sometimes those kinds of votes that are split are the best times that we can address what we need to do, because we have to come to some place that we will all agree. I also would like to say that we have one of the best teams in the country, and I appreciate your recognition of them, because we are provided the opportunity to work with a group that cares deeply about what's happening in this community, because most of them live here, and they expect that they live just like the people in our other residents. And so that in itself is an important part of what creates the fabric of this community. But I'd also like to recognize Mr. Winston, who really could probably quote the Unified Development Ordinance if required to in a school event. But I would like to ask him to make a few remarks on his behalf, as this is his last council meeting.
Thank you very much, Mayor Lyles, once again. First, I would like to thank staff for all of your work that you've done drafting this plan. It provides us a roadmap for our future growth. I know oftentimes, I say from this dais that, the data is there, the data is there. But please let this be a representation. This award is the highest honor, the highest level of honoration that a planning document can get by its national professional peers. This isn't somebody we hired to audit the report. These are folks who do this day in and day out, and honestly have no real interest in what's going on specifically in Charlotte. They're dealing with everything around the country. So this is proof that the work that we've done is good work, and we should also thank the thousands of our residents who participated in the process. And thank you to City Council for adopting this important vision. This award serves as a reminder that by working together, we can overcome challenges, address disparities, and build a future where every community member's needs are not only heard, but prioritized. We're inspired by this recognition to continue our mission of a city that truly serves and uplifts all residents, especially when looking at how we grow and develop as a city. At this time, I would like to invite staff to please stand up so we can recognize you as we accept this award.
So the next portion of our agenda is the public forum. On the the last meeting of each month, we invite people to come down to address the City Council. We have a process by which we do this. We have 15 people who are signed up to speak. We do have a waiting list for those that, if someone is not speaking, that the next person, but we will hear from 15 people. And these people will be identified by calling into the city clerk's office to be placed on our agenda for this. And so what we do in this respect is we listen to what you want to say and tell us, and then later on, if necessary, we will have a response to a question or an issue that you have. So I'm going to begin with our first a couple of things. I always say, when you're in the building, these steps are very steep, and we would love to have you be careful. I will ask for 2 people to come down. We have 2 podiums, and we'll continue that process until we have heard from each speaker. Because we have 15 speakers, each speaker is given 2 minutes, and there is a bell, would we call it, that will ring, and at that point, then please conclude your remarks, and we will go to the next speaker so everyone has an opportunity to participate. So our first 2 speakers today are Raja Tube and Liam Carrara. Would you please come down if you're here?
Right.
Here we are. Thank you. And
is a very short time.
I'm sorry, I'm
Very short time, 2 minutes.
I can't understand what, I can't hear you.
Too short.
It is our procedure that way, so it will be the 2 minutes. So let's start with Raisha.
Right.
Thank you.
Hello, Council. My name is Raisa. I am a volunteer and a foster for animal care and control. Our group has attended many times now, advocating for our city shelter, which is overcrowded and underfunded. As volunteers, we have hands-on experience. We spend a lot of our free time walking and enriching dogs. We do anything possible for others to see what we see, that we have some amazing dogs in our community. Sadly, due to the amount of strays coming in lately, these amazing dogs get put on euthanasia list to make room for the new ones. Just last week, the shelter had an intake rate of 26 dogs per day. That's 26 new dogs per day for an already overcapacity shelter. This puts all of the dogs that we have cared for at risk. We have seen too many on their last day now. We just can't keep up. As a foster, I try to take the dogs from the list to give them a chance. Nothing really beats seeing a dog from the list get adopted and pick a Christmas tree with his family, as I saw over the weekend. I wish they all had this chance. We fosters had 125 dogs in our care as of November 6th. That's 125 lives that would not be here had it not been for fosters. And although we have grown in numbers, we just can't keep up. The only way to keep up is for the shelter to be equipped with what it needs to handle this massive population growth. They need adequate space, they need adequate staffing, a department structural change, and funding for community programs. This is the only way for us to solve the problem now and to have sustainable, lasting change for the future for all of the animals in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Mr. Carrara, please.
Hello, Council. My name is Liam, and I am 10 years old. I have been the foster brother of all the dogs my mom has brought home. And though I've asked, can we keep it more times than I can count, I understand that fostering saves lives, and there are a lot of homeless dogs that need help. Dogs like our dog Luna, we lost her a few months ago. She was adopted from animal control 16 years ago, at a time where the population of Charlotte was not what it is today. My mom always tells me the story of how Luna was adopted and returned, but she was terrible on a leash, nippy, and jumpy. My mom found her months later and adopted her into what would be her forever home. She went on to be the best dog, and she was loved until the very end. It breaks my heart that dogs are not getting a chance, let alone 2 like Luna. The shelter is so overcrowded that a lot of good dogs don't have a fair chance to find a forever home. Often the dogs that have been there for a few weeks are the first to go. They'll never get their chance of finding a loving family. And fosters like my mom want to help as many dogs as they can, but they can't keep up with the amount of dogs that come in. To keep up with the amount of homeless animals in our community, animal control is in desperate need for funding. A lot has changed in 16 years, and it's time for a bigger shelter, for more staff to care for the animals, and for other life-saving programs. This is the only way for real change for the animals in our community and to save some more lives. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liam. Our next 2 speakers are Jennifer Bartell and Cindy Campbell.
Good evening. I volunteer for Friends of Feral Felines. I'm also a foster at CMPD Animal Care and Control. You've heard people come and speak over the past couple months about the need for a new shelter. I am here to talk about another way to lessen the burden at CMPD Animal Care and Control, and that is low-cost spay-neuter, and particularly low-cost TNR for community cats. TNR involves fixing, vaccinating, and ear-tipping community cats and then returning them to their territory. Community cats are cats who do not have owners. They live outside through no fault of their own and rely on human caregivers to survive. They may be friendly or feral, and it's estimated there are around 100,000 roaming or community cats in Charlotte. Without human intervention, feline populations can triple in the span of a year. Female cats can have up to 3 litters per year with an average of 4 kittens per litter. These kittens that are born out and found outside are often taken to Animal Care and Control, which directly impacts the shelter's ability to provide services to other animals in need. Through Friends of Feral Felines, I'm helping community members try and find resources for low-cost TNR appointments, which are very limited and cannot be found in the Charlotte area. Spay-neuter appointments at a regular vet can typically cost around $450. Low-cost TNR should be around $25 to $50, but recently, if you can find an appointment, it's not uncommon to pay $100 to $150 per cat. Humane Society used to offer same-day appointments. They don't any longer. Animal Care and Control posts that they have a TNR program. I applied for TNR appointments in May. I've never heard back. It's just very difficult for people to find appointments. So I would ask that City Council please look at giving some kind of funding, either a grant or a line item in the budget for low-cost spay-neuter and TNR surgeries. Thank you.
All right. Ms. Campbell?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. On the City of Charlotte's homepage, there are 6 icons. The 4th is a pawn underneath of the words pet adoption with the phrase, give a pet a loving home. Upon clicking that icon, one is routed to the city's orphan pet care division. Right now, there are 5 faces peering out from that page, if you dare to look. Wolf, Ferris, Dandelion, Crush, and Sage are their names. Shameless plug, they are available for adoption to kind and loving homes. But why? Why are they in the shelter in the first place? Why is there a need for a shelter? Let me first say the caretakers, employees and volunteers alike of our homeless friends, whether at the city shelter or many of the other overworked at-capacity rescue groups in Charlotte, deserve medals of honor for their daily acts of kindness and compassion to the vulnerable souls who have found themselves in need of good humans in our city. I can only speak for myself, but I'm tired, I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm stressed, I'm heartbroken, and I find myself at a breaking point. Citizens are willingly exploiting fellow residents by not being part of a solution that starts with prevention. Spaying and neutering is the only way out of this situation. Most of us know the Albert Einstein definition of insanity, doing the same thing over again and expecting different results. Charlotte and its residents are engaged in insanity. We are not a pet-friendly city. Having dog parks and breweries where one can take their dog is not the definition of pet-friendly. The missing ingredient is awareness, education, and free or low-cost resources for spay-neuter services. In 2023, this is inhumane and outright stupid for a city this size and allegedly so progressive to not have spay-neuter information and resource access broadcast on all media platforms, buses, murals, billboards in Charlotte. I'll end with a nod to Bob Barker, who died earlier this year. Please be a responsible pet owner and spay or neuter your pet. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next 2 speakers are Lay Shay Hada. I hope I'm close, and I apologize for not being literate in everyone's name, as well. Oh, I'm sorry. This has changed.
Jerome Wagner and
since-
Carla Aaron Lopez?
Hold on. I get several copies of these during the day, and I had a copy that was done at early. As followed by Carla Lopez, Aaron Lopez.
Good evening, and thank you for this opportunity to speak to you. My name is Jerome Wagner. I'm a retired environmental engineer who's been a climate activist for a decade. I lead a climate justice-focused group named 350 Charlotte, and I convene the CIAP Accountability Committee of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Climate Leaders. The CIAP Accountability Committee has been active for 2 years at this point. Despite our principled and persistent effort, we have not been able to assure ourselves that the city will meet its near-term sustainability goal, adopted during the summer of 2018, for carbon-free city buildings and city fleet by 2030. We went so far as to assert to you on June 7th, 2023, that the city will not meet its 2030 sustainability goal. We asserted further that the shortfall from the approved goals would be significant. Our findings have not been rebutted by you on council, nor by executive staff, nor by operational staff. I'll state at this time further that the city is not implementing the detailed tactical approach and timelines identified in the Strategic Energy Action Plan, the CIAP. That plan was approved by the seated council in December of 2018. The CMCL and Accountability Committee remain appreciative of the efforts being made by Sarah Hazel, her direct reports, and the city staff who are working with them. But the thanks and appreciation stop there. As we approach the halfway point of this program, we echo and amplify the city's original sustainability goals. Further, we know that there are many in the city who value and prioritize the climate mitigation goals and activities I am referring to here. Net, I assert that there has been very little real progress so far in terms of decarbonizing the city. In closing, I beg the council to redouble attention and progress in this area during 2024.
Thank you
Good
very much.
evening and thank you.
For your comments. Sharon Lopez.
Excuse me. Good evening, Charlotte City Council. On this eve of my 40th birthday, I and my biggest collaborators, the Mint Museum and Charlotte is Creative, would like to express our gratitude for the Opportunity Fund, and let me tell you why. For 3 years, Local Street has given a diverse display of all of the different types of artists and creatives we have in Charlotte. And for the first time this year, just to go along with industry standards, I was able to not only pay each participating artist, but also participate in ethical practices to where volunteers who worked hanging works of art for 8 hours a day in a short amount of time period were able to be compensated as well. As you continue forward and hats change at the same time, I want you to think about moments like these when City Council makes decisions like those that impact entire communities in the city of Charlotte. When I first started Local Street in 2021, it was in response to the Black Lives Matter mural. I did not want those artists pigeonholed for performative action that has now disappeared on the street. Instead, I saw the entire communities of Charlotte, the diversity of Charlotte, come together. Year 1, 3 days, we saw 1,000 residents, many of whom did not go to a museum ever. Year 2, we saw that same amount on the opening night, 2,000 people in 2 weeks. This very last year, 1,000 people on opening night on a Sunday, 2,000 people during the course of 1 week. When we create collaborative actions as such between individuals, local government, and major institutions, what we know is that in 3 years, over 5,000 people, majority from the Black and brown communities, now know Charlotte. You're welcome. I appreciate you all.
Thank you very much. All right, our next two speakers are Azat Sami and Brian Kidd. Wait a minute, I have got now, people have handed me two. Let's get rid of some. See this other one. That's okay. We'll go in this order. We'll come back to that. Stephanie, no, this it. We will catch up with the next person, okay? All right.
Before my time
please.
starts, I apologize. I thought we were limited to 3 minutes. That's why I spoke out of line. That's what we were told by your, I think, city clerk or someone in the city. Anyway, do I start?
Can you tell us your name again, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Good evening, respected members of the council. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for this forum. I am Izzat Saimeh, a proud Palestinian American, a local businessman, an entrepreneur, a father, and a longtime Charlotte resident. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Council, can you see me? We expect and demand our elected officials to hear us and see us. We expect you to lead. We expect you to lead in spite of any tough blowback, any political football being played, or political calculations. Be the voice of the voiceless. Human lives and the safety of innocent citizens are supreme too, and supersede any other calculations and considerations. We should not just parrot meaninglessly self-evident values, but rather implement them in our private and public lives. Our community has sent over to the City Council, as well as the County Commissioners, a resolution denouncing Israeli genocide and supporting a just cause, the Palestinian cause. Have you taken a look at it? Have you? We need a commitment from you to truly consider passing it. Palestinians not only want to be free, but want to live in dignity as well. 80 years and many generations ago of suffocating blockades, massacres, occupation, and stifling apartheid are more than enough. American weaponry and political cover has greenlighted Israeli bombing campaign last 6 weeks. 15,000 innocent lives taken. 6,200 children. Do you have children? I do. 38,000 people injured. Speak up against atrocities and the genocide taking place today, 21st century.
Thank you very much.
Please
for your
consider
comment.
the
Thank you.
resolution. It's in your email box, ma'am.
Thank you. Could you give me your name, please? Could you give me your name?
My name's Brian Kidd.
I believe I was up next.
I understand. Thank you. We will go ahead and proceed. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Brian.
All right. Actually, would I be able to hand it off to him first and then I can go after?
Madam Clerk Meyer, so Brian will go ahead and speak.
Do you like the schedule we all have?
No, I'm fine, thank you. We'll manage this. I understand. I appreciate the support and the help and assistance, but we'll go with that. Yeah. Please, thank you for that. All right, Brian.
Yes. My name's Brian Kidd, and I am one of the newly elected co-chairs of the Charlotte Metro Democratic Socialists of America. And I'm here representing my chapter, but also joining the supporters of the Palestinian cause in calling on you to support a permanent ceasefire in the Israeli-Gaza conflict and also condemn the genocidal actions of the Israeli government. After 50 days of conflict, it's clear that what Israel is doing is just a complete overreaction to the pain that they suffered on October 7th. Over 10,000 civilians, I believe I heard an even updated number, over 15,000 civilians have been killed, tens of thousands more have been injured, and over hundreds of thousands have been displaced from their homes and don't even know if they'll have a home to return to after the bombing stops. I believe as an American, we should have learned by now that bombing countries into the ground does not solve anything. We saw in Vietnam and Afghanistan that the resistance of the people in those countries outlasted what damage we did to those countries. And in Libya and in Iraq, we saw that those bombings just led to an even worse destabilization, which led to even worse civilian deaths and terrorism in its wake. I think as Americans, we should be pushing Israel to learn not from repeating the same actions as us, but rather look to countries like the UK, look to countries like Spain, which dealt with their separatist issues with the IRA and with ETA after learning after decades of conflict that diplomacy was the way to solve it, bringing them to the table, deciding to lay down arms and find an agreement that finally ends the cycles and cycles of conflicts that have just embittered the people of Palestine and Israel. Thank you.
please?
I can't hear you, Mayor. I'm sorry.
Can you give me your,
Yes, my name is Laith Shahada, and I was after Izzat.
Thank you very much. Please, you have 2 minutes.
Okay. Thank you to the council and to the mayor for listening to us today. My name is Laith Shahada. I'm 26 years old, resident of Charlotte, and I am a proud Palestinian American. My parents came to this country a year before I was born, escaping apartheid and a brutal occupation, and to search for the American dream. 26 years later, I like to think that I lived that dream. I hold a master's degree in quantitative finance, which allows me to work my dream job. I enjoy the freedom to travel and have the privilege to play soccer and spend my free time outside. My home is safe, free from the sounds of gunfire, bombs, and frequent military raids. But today I want to share the story of my family, most of which who still live in Palestine and have very different life stories. For many generations, we have lived in a town called Arif. Just above the mountain facing Arif is an Israeli Jewish-only city, what is referred to as a settlement, built on land that belongs to my family. Our land was stolen to build this settlement. Our land, which used to house thousands of olive trees and produce some of the world's richest olive oil, now houses hatred and extremism. What used to be a source of income for my family is now stolen. These settlers, many of whom are American citizens, often descend onto our town in an effort to intimidate people, and more often than not, these settlers are armed and have killed family members and friends of mine. Recently, one of them was a relative by the name of Nadal. He had a wife, a young daughter also. He was shot in the back 3 times and died. Nadal's story is just one of those from my village, among many others, killed for the crime of being born Palestinians. Their aspirations and dreams were shattered by those who couldn't find peace in an American dream, but immigrated to a promised land far away in search of blood, driven by an evil and racist anti-Semitic ideology called Zionism. In the last few weeks, we have seen 20,000 more of these stories happen, and we ask the City Council to do what it can to intervene. My purpose of coming before all of you today is to consider standing in the face of injustice and having the City of Charlotte take a stand against apartheid and genocide. Myself and many Charlotte residents are here to ask you to stand on the right side of history and immediately issue a ceasefire resolution following other cities like Carrboro, North Carolina, Atlanta, Georgia, and Richmond, California. We ask the City Council to listen to its citizens.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry if we are going to hear the speakers, then we can't hear everyone in the room at one time. So I'd like for us to get the speakers through, and then of course there is space in this building for you to have other remarks or additional meetings with each other. Our next speaker is Jabril Huff and Parker DeMose. Speaking Yusuf? No. Laith. I know, we'll get him. No, it's Yusuf. The last person was Laith. Laith was the last person, the young man. Mm-hmm. All right, I know. All right, Mr. Huff.
Good evening. Like you said, I'm Jabril Huff. I'm here representing the Islamic Center of Charlotte and one of about 30,000 Charlotte area Muslims. We are facing a humanitarian crisis and genocide in Gaza. A crisis that is not just confined to the Gaza Strip. We have people in Charlotte who have lost family members in Gaza due to the U.S.-Israeli bombing. We live in a global village, a village that if you're Palestinian and or Muslim, your life and concerns are not as valuable to most elected officials and political leaders. We are here tonight to say the lives of Palestinians and Muslims deserves the same kind of respect that you would give any other community. Most of you on council have had some type of relationship with myself or other Muslims and Palestinians in the community of Charlotte. You visited our masjids, you received our votes, our money. We've shared boards together. We have stood for justice together. Tonight, that justice must include us. It must include the Palestinians and Muslims. When our government and elected leaders turn their backs on us, we get genocide. Over 14, now 15,000 Palestinians have died in Gaza. Islamophobia is on the rise in America. 3 Palestinian young men Sunday night were shot in Vermont. And this weekend, one of our fellow community members who had signed up was harassed at his door because the address is publicly known if you're speaking here. We need to change that. It has been said that the hottest places in hell are reserved for those who in times of great moral crisis maintain their neutrality. Worse than that, I would say the hottest place is reserved for those who are not just neutral, but support the moral crisis. We must fight this racism, Zionism, and Islamophobia. We must free Palestine.
Give us your name, please.
My name is Parker Demos.
Thank you.
I would like, underscoring what I'm about to say, I want it to be known that the person who was just skipped was the person who was harassed last night, right? Okay. What grounds this resolution we have proposed, which has been brought forth by constituents of Mecklenburg County and is being considered by our city council, is an ethic rooted in community, solidarity, and love. The call for Palestinian liberation and sovereignty echoes around the world. I have never in my life seen such consistent and widespread global direct action and international solidarity. The message is clear. The people of this world reject the dying clutches of imperialism. We know there is a world after imperialism. Imperialism is an unsustainable, failed project. We know there is a world after this genocide. Palestine will be free. Palestinian children who play under the cool shades of olive trees will be free. Palestinian women and men who are human beings, who are sensitive, who are not barbaric. They deserve social mobility, full citizenship, and reparations from the decades of apartheid violence at the hands of the failed, racist, genocidal Zionist state of the guys. This is the right thing to do. Your community believes in you. And finally, to my Palestinian and Palestinian American friends and allies, you are loved. You will see justice. You will decide your own justice. From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Thank you.
Leith Shada, if I said getting close, please. And then followed by Ibrahim El Hadak.
Yusuf, come down.
Hey, yes, please come down. Yes, please go.
All right. My name is Yusuf Hawisa. All right, here we go. I'm here to share my thoughts on the objective truth that any and all people have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This isn't just a belief, and I refer to it as an objective truth because any person not devoid of humanity would agree with these words so impactful that they are enshrined in our nation's Declaration of Independence. Our country holds these values dear in theory, as does the overwhelming majority of the world, as evidenced by the passage of the UN's Declaration of Human Rights, a vote wherein the United States voted yes. Similarly, I ask this council to support a simple call for a permanent and lasting end to the violence in occupied Palestine, a nation under siege and devastation from an oppressive force who seeks only to use its assets to subjugate and exterminate others in the interest of expansion, similar to what brought the United States into World War II. It is patently un-American to support these acts of terror, and the federal government in so doing has demonstrated how far out of touch it is with the people. Only fringe elements of our society support the genocide being carried out in another, a fact evidenced by my being accosted and threatened in my own home last night. This is a police report, and this is your fault. A man crossed the threshold into a space I should expect safety in, seeking to do me harm. The cancerous ideologies allowing for genocide are no longer just foreign, but are as deep-rooted in this country as Islamophobia has shown to be. So I ask you, counsel, do you aid and abet these acts? In the same way I have a right to free speech under our Constitution, the people of Palestine have the right to freedom and be like the man who tried to intimidate me out of making this statement. Represent the beautiful and diverse people you were elected in order to represent and call for peace. You serve at our pleasure. You do not dictate our opinion. Do your jobs, or we will soon sit in those seats. Thank you, counsel.
Our next speaker, I believe, is Ibrahim El Hadak.
Good evening, council members. My name is Ibrahim, and I'm a concerned resident whose grandfather is a survivor of the 1948 Nakba from northern Palestine. My grandfather tells us the story where he had to flee with his family from Israel's militia's terrorism as they embarked on their fishing boat towards southern Lebanon, and were there never allowed to go back. In the current invasion of Gaza, UN has described it as the worst ever humanitarian crisis they have witnessed. Usually in classifying genocide, scholars scramble to prove the motive. While for Gaza, Israel has made it clear in their own statements to, quote, mow the lawn and justify killing, quote, animals. Benjamin Netanyahu himself invoked the biblical reference of the Amalek from Deuteronomy 25, which continues to read, now go attack the Amalekites, put to death men, women, and children. I'm trying to understand why people could be hesitant to see it for what it is. Indeed, if we take a look at history, at the injustices that have happened, and we see why people have stayed silent for a long time. To name a few of these injustices: slavery, South Africa's apartheid, Jim Crow, the Holocaust, the Vietnam War, and so more. Do you ever wonder at that time how did mainstream public address these situations? Were they reluctant? Were they unsure what to say? Or they just deferred it as completely complicated? Here comes today, and we abhorrently view this as human rights violations, atrocities, war crimes, genocides. It's easier for us to look back at history and judge it with a clean slate when it's all said and done. Only the courageous ones stand up and call it for what it is. This is the case of the Palestinians' plight for freedom from Israeli occupation for the over 75 years. City council members, please don't underestimate the action you take in standing up for justice. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Coco Love, followed by Katie Gunzenhauser. And could you give us your name, please?
Yes, I'm Katie Gunzenhauser.
Is Coco Love in the space, in the room? If not, Samar Hidak?
Hello, good evening. As I said earlier, my name is Katie Gunzenhauser, and I have been a citizen of Charlotte for 5 years. Like many of you, I love this city. I love the trees, the people, the Charlotte's Got a Lot slogan, and the potential and vibrance. In the past, when I imagined speaking in front of all of you, I never thought I would have to come here with such a heavy heart and a very simple request. I am taking the podium tonight to urge each of you to read the statement that people have written and to make a statement and take action in solidarity with Palestinians. Our government, built on the promised ideology of freedom and prosperity for all, is neglecting and obliterating the rights and livelihoods of millions of Palestinians at our big age in 2023. As a public health professional, I am deeply disturbed to see what is happening and what our country's continual weaponization of our economic and social power to uproot the lives of millions of Palestinians. Since October 7th, the Biden administration's drastic, devastating, and quite frankly, illogical response to the siege on Gaza has made me find myself not asking for you to do anything, but simply stand. I urge you to stand in solidarity with us, with our people facing a world no one deserves, and to write and share this resolution stating these claims. By failing to do this, you are complicit in genocide and in stealing the rights of human safety, health, and home that all of us deserve. To not do this is to fail me, to fail our Charlotte citizens who truly believe in equality. To not do this is to condone the massacre of people who, just like us, are passionate about their jobs, about their educations, about their communities and their families.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much. I believe in you. Have a good evening.
Samara Hidak.
Good evening. My name is Samar Al-Hidik. I'm American with a Palestinian and Lebanese heritage. My great-grandfather had to flee from his own home because of the Israelis in 1948. I'm a 12-year-old girl, and I'm here to advocate for a ceasefire in Gaza. I'm advocating for a word I didn't even know the meaning of until now. I'm here to speak up for children like me who are being killed in Gaza every single day. I'm hurt by the images and videos of men, women, and children's bodies scattered across the streets and under buildings. I can't imagine that Palestinians are living without water, food, medication, electricity, and proper shelter, while it is a basic necessity for every human being. I can't imagine that while I'm talking, a child dies and another could be killed in the next 10 minutes. Thankfully, there is a pause at the moment. I can't imagine that my country is funding for the killing of a whole nation. This needs to stop now. Call for a ceasefire permanently. Free Palestine.
That concludes our public forum for this evening. And so we have heard you, and thank you for just being as respectful as you've been. I appreciate that very much. I apologize for not always, but there's a lot of paper up here, and I want to especially recognize that we understand that this is an effort that we are paying attention to, and so appreciate what you've done and said. So that concludes our presentation from the public forum. Again, as I say, please be careful as you leave the chamber, or if you choose to leave this chamber, but you're welcome to stay for the remaining portion of our agenda tonight. Thank you very much. All right. We're going to go to the public hearing. The next item on our agenda is item number 7, a public hearing and a decision of public hearing to close a portion of alleyway off of Roland Street. Do we have any speakers, Madam Clerk?
No, ma'am.
Hearing no, do we have an item?
Second.
Could I have a motion to close the public hearing and adopt a resolution closing the alleyway?
Close and adopt.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. If your approval, please raise your hand in favor of the motion. All right, thank you. The next item is a public hearing to close a portion of Paragon Drive and adopt a resolution. We have no speakers on this, so we have a motion to close the public hearing and adopt a resolution.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor of the closure, raise your hand. Thank you. Unanimous. The next is a public hearing and a decision on the Savona Mill Historic Landmark designation, and we do not have any speakers for the public hearing. Do we have a motion to close the public hearing and adopt an ordinance with the effective date of November 27, designating the property?
Move to close and adopt.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion. All in favor, please raise your hand. All in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. The next item is item 10, a public hearing and a decision on the White McCoy House landmark designation. Do we have any speakers?
No, ma'am.
Hearing none, do we have closed the public hearing and adopt an ordinance with the effective date of November 27, designating the property of the McCoy House?
Close and adopt.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion. All in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. I have to say that I think one of the daughters of the White House actually works for the clinic on Wilkerson Boulevard. Yeah. So, All right, the next item is item 12, an extension. We will be pulling this item from the agenda, Mr. Jones, so we will not take a vote on item 12. We will be coming back with that when the manager is prepared for an approval or adoption. The next item is 13, I'm sorry, Madam.
Did we just pull 12? Thank you.
The next item is agenda item 13, to approve payment to the NCDOT for the removal of a deed restriction in the amount of $141,000 and adopting a budget ordinance appropriating that fund from the Beltway 77 phase owner to the CATS Capital Projects Fund. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. The next item is Independence Boulevard, 14, Independence Boulevard Busway Restoration Project. Adopt a resolution authorizing the manager to negotiate and execute $950,000 for a municipal agreement with NCDOT for the design and construction of the busway entrance and exit on Independence Boulevard.
Second.
And adopt that ordinance. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? I would like to say that Mr. Driggs and I were with the MTC when they actually voted unanimously to recommend this. It is particularly important as we talk about the Far East and the ability to get to the center city. So all in favor, raise your hands. Anyone opposed? Thank you. The next item is 15. The next item is 15, Eastland property transfer to Mecklenburg County to adopt a resolution for the transfer 4.5 acres of city-owned property to Mecklenburg County for the use as a public park, and the manager to execute all documents.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor, please raise your hand. That's unanimous as well. The next item is item 16. For the sale of city-owned land for the West Boulevard Remount Development, adopt a resolution approving the sale of .7 acres to Lambert Commercial Real Estate LLC for $500,000 with the manager to negotiate and execute documents, and adopt a budget ordinance appropriating the $500,000 from Lambert to the General Fund Capital Projects Fund.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Oh, Ms. Watlington, I'm sorry. Couldn't move fast enough.
No, you're fine. I won't belabor the point, but I did just want to recognize Lambert Commercial and Lilius and Tracy and the Restaurant Economic Development staff for the work that they did on coming to some mutually beneficial community benefit agreements with the community on this one. Without a rezoning, there really wasn't a required conversation, so I'm immensely appreciative of the work that they've done to get to a place where the community can feel comfortable that what will be done here will be supportive of the playbook.
All right. Any other questions or comments? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. All right. The next item that we have is to go back into closed session. So, Mr. Baker, we have two items, I think, total.
That's correct, Madam Mayor. I need a motion to go into closed session to consult with the attorney in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege pursuant to NCGS 143-318-11A3, and to view a law enforcement recording pursuant to NCGS 143-318-11A10.
And we will go back up to room 267.
So moved.
Oh, or down.
Second.
Or back here.
CH14.
We're going to go to the rear, the room behind us.
here.
So we have a motion and a second. Everybody raise your hand. Thank you very much. Let's go.
adjourn afterwards.
We will have an adjournment after the two items are discussed. Okay, thank you, everyone.
No, we will be adjourned.
We just want to make a note to the people that are watching us that we will be in a closed session and we'll adjourn our meeting at the end of that closed session. So thank you very much for those of you who have watched us this evening.